Let us now turn our attention to King Louis XIV, the Sun King. Louis believed his right to rule was God's will. He had the divine right to rule as King of France. And from his birth, he had been celebrated as a miracle. Here he is as a little baby with his mom, Queen Anne, and then here he is as a teenager. But like he's not just any teenager, he's also depicted here like Jupiter, king of the Roman gods. So why was his birth miraculous? Well, his parents, after 23 years of marriage, had not yet had a live birth. Anne had 4 unfortunate stillbirths. And then to make matters more difficult, his parents, after 23 years of marriage, they didn't like each other anymore, and they didn't spend a lot of time together. And so there was less opportunities for an heir to be conceived. Now, the miracle happens after one event. The king and queen had to be together in the same castle for some kind of a party. And then a rainstorm came, this big giant thunderstorm, which prevented the king from leaving the castle. And they decided to, have a few drinks and, get together. And then 9 months later, Queen Anne was pregnant. And so people thought that was a miracle. And when he came out, he was just this, precious little treasured child, this miraculous child. And then I think a year and a half later, his younger brother was born. So Anne, his mother, had him very late in life, and then 2 years later had a second son. So there was the heir to the throne, Louis, and then his younger brother, who, it's a crass term, but the heir and the spare. And everybody loved it. Okay, great. Now, he grows up and is celebrated for his good looks, his manners, and he gets the nickname Sun King because he is like the sun. He brightens our day. He warms our faces with his glorious light. He is the center of our world. Our days begin and end defined by his existence. Oh. And here he is. This is a portrait of him as a young man. And then this drawing here, this is him in a ballet performance. So he was very good at riding and hunting, and he was also an avid supporter of ballet, which at this time was a fairly new form of dance, a new form of art. And on his coronation, his official crowning as king, there was this day-long ballet performance in which he literally was the sun. And so you see the sun on his chest there. And then this was another way for him to show off his, fine, thick thighs and calves, like his beautiful legs, and prance around. And another way for him to manipulate the nobility, because he wanted them to want to be around him, and they wanted to be invited to these banquets and into these dances. They wanted to participate. They wanted to get close to the king, because if they got close to the king, if they were in his favor, then they would benefit with all of the riches and all of the titles and all the property and all the tax benefits that he would give out. At a young age, he married Marie-Thérèse, the daughter of Philip IV. And as I said before, he was extremely devoted to her for the first year of marriage. It was really sweet. And she herself, she was quiet. She wasn't too smart. She liked to spend her free time playing cards and gambling. She had no real interest in politics or literature or the arts. She tolerated his infidelities, and she just did exactly what a good French queen should do. She was pretty, she was sweet, she was kind, she was pious, and she had 6 kids. And she died of a sudden illness when she was 44 years old. And The story goes that he rushed to her side and he was by her side until her death, and was just there and concerned for her. And he remarked, "This is the first trouble she has ever given me." Oh, oh. This here is the official family portrait of Louis and his wife and their kids, and then his younger brother and his wife and their kids. It's quite a scene, right? Now, I mention all of this because I want you to get a real complete picture of him when we look at our next artwork. This is our next artwork. This is a portrait of Louis XIV, and the artist is Hyacinthe Rigaud. This is Louis when he is 63 years old. Ooh la la. Now he's standing in front of his royal throne. You can see it there. And then he's very casually resting his hand on top of the royal scepter, and resting on a cushion next to him is the crown of France. He wears this extremely dramatic cape that is blue velvet and embroidered with gold thread in the shape of the fleur de lis, the lily flower, the emblem of France. And then he tosses up the side of the cape to reveal his very fine fit legs and the underside of the cape, which is lined in fur. Wow, wow, wow. This is the official royal portrait. What we're seeing here is a display of power and wealth. Louis would often say, "L'état c'est moi." The state is I. I am France. And what we see here in this portrait is the wealth of France and the fitness of France with the wealth of Louis and the fitness of Louis. He stands in the center looking down at us, which is a really difficult thing to do considering he was only 5 feet 4 inches. But he stands above us. He is greater or grander than us. So let's look at the details in this. We see him standing in front of his throne, and not only does he have the crown and the scepter, but he's also displaying this gold jewel-encrusted sword. Now, I want you to think about what this means in terms of his rule of power. How does he rule his people? In today's world with guns, we are disassociated with the power and depth of the blade, of the sword. But before guns, that's how you kill people, with sharp blades. And think of this as perhaps a official portrait of the school's president, and they have a rifle attached to their hip. What kind of a ruler, what kind of a leader is that? What kind of a leader is he telling us that he is? He's not afraid to intimidate you. He's not afraid to cut you down if you're in his way. You are nothing compared to him. Wow. And then this cape. So it's just extremely decadent and expensive materials. The blue velvet, the gold thread of the embroidery, and then he lifts it up so you can see that it's lined in this white fur with these black spots. This type of fur is very distinct. It's very specific. It's the type of fur. The white fur with the black tips is characteristic of the ermine. The ermine is a small little kind of ferret creature, a little weasel, and its winter coat turns this soft, pure white, and then their tail maintains a little black tip. So when you see the white and the black tip, it's this small little creature, the ermine. And they're farmed for their very soft coats. So think about that, and then think about how many ermine were used to make this cape. Do you think that was expensive? So he's showing off his wealth, but it's not just his wealth. This is the wealth of France. L'État, c'est moi. I am France. And so France is wealthy, and he rules over us with a jewel-encrusted sword. Wow. Wow, wow, wow. Now he also wears this fantastic large wig. Oftentimes students will ask about his hair. He started going bald in his 20s and immediately started wearing these wigs. And his favorite were these long, curly brown hair wigs. And he would have a wig for every occasion, every time of the day. And he made wigs super fashionable. Men all over Europe were scrambling to have wigs that look like Louis. And then if we turn down, we see these beautiful white tights and these legs. Oof! Now, what is a 63-year-old man doing showing off these fine stems? Here, let me go here again. He's showing off his legs because, well, let's think of the phrase, L'État, c'est moi. I am France. He's showing off that he is fit, he is strong, he is healthy. Even though he's 63 years old, he's not some kind of like old rickety man with, these little tiny dinky legs. No, he's showing off his health, his physical strength as another manifestation of the strength and health of France. Now, this portrait, it's saying a lot about him. It's saying a lot about the wealth of France. It's also further establishing the hierarchy of France. Now, this is a political cartoon depicting how power and wealth was distributed in France during this time. There were 3 levels of society and a huge disproportion of wealth and power. There were 3 estates. Think of them like 3 classes. First estate, second estate, and third estate. First estate was the Catholic Church. The second estate was the royalty and nobility. And then the third was the peasant and working class. And what you can see in this political cartoon was how the French first and second estates physically and psychologically abused the mass population, working them to death, literally breaking their backs and reaping all of the resources for their own kind of frivolous indulgences. Coming back to the portrait of Louis by Rigaud, what we see is an example of his rule as an absolute monarch. So absolute monarchy, that's our next vocabulary term. The absolute monarchy is a monarch that rules by divine right and is the source of all law and authority. And then just to help illustrate how he is France, this is the official coat of arms for the King of France. A blue field with a gold lily flower, or if you want to say it in French, the fleur de lis, the flower of the lily. And that's what we see draped all over Louis. So he's telling us that his right to rule is God-given. In fact, he doesn't need to stand in that chair or sit in that chair. He can stand. He doesn't need to wear the crown. He is the King of France. In fact, this portrait originally hung in the throne room above his chair when he was not present in the room. So now let's think about that. Imagine yourself to be maybe one of the nobility and you're hanging out, waiting for him to show up. And do you want to start gossiping about him or trash talking him? Yeah, he's not in the room, but his painting is there. He's looking down at you. And in the painting, he's not sitting in his throne, yet he is present. He's not sitting in the throne, but he's present and all around. This is a way to visually intimidate you. You may not see me sitting on my throne, but I am king, and I am always listening. I am always watching. Many believe, or many understand, his need to convey his power due to the fact that his father had a very difficult reign. He first had to grapple for control from his mother, and then there was a noble uprising in which his father almost lost the throne. So from birth, Louis knew and understood that his power to rule absolutely required everyone else to follow along, to fall in line. And that if any of them realized that they could gather their own power and rise up against him, that he would become then vulnerable to them, he had to squash that. So royal portraits like this are meant to establish and maintain control, not just of the French peasant class. What about them? I'll just cut them down. But to intimidate and control the nobility, to maintain his absolute power. And we're going to see this now carry through into some architecture during the French Baroque. We're going to go hang out at Louis's palace, Versailles. Ooh, see you then.